Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. There was a girl in my class who did not speak a single word for almost the entire school year, and for a long time I thought she was just strange, or rude, or cold. The whole school had decided she was a freak, and I was too much of a coward to disagree. But behind that silence was a story so heartbreaking that when I finally learned it, I could not look at another quiet person the same way again. This is the story of the girl who never spoke a word, and how she taught me that the loudest pain in the world is often the pain that makes no sound at all. Her name was Mara, and I will never forget her. She arrived halfway through the year, which is the worst possible time to be the new kid. Everyone already had their friends, their groups, their little worlds, and here came this small, pale girl with dark hair falling over her face, sliding into the empty seat at the back like she was trying to disappear into the wall. The teacher introduced her and asked her to say hello to the class. And Mara just looked down at her desk and said nothing. Not a word. The silence stretched out until it got uncomfortable, and a few kids laughed. The teacher moved on quickly. And that was the first time I ever saw her, folding herself smaller and smaller, wishing she were invisible. At first I assumed she was just shy, the way anyone would be on a first day in a new place. But the days turned into weeks, and Mara still had not spoken. Not to a teacher, not to a classmate, not to anyone. She did her work in perfect silence. She nodded or shook her head when a teacher asked her something directly, and even that seemed to cost her enormous effort. When she was called on to read aloud, she would simply sit there, frozen, staring at the page, until the teacher gave up and moved to the next student. The whole room would sigh, or snicker, or roll their eyes. And Mara would go a little paler each time. It did not take long for the school to turn her into a joke. Kids started calling her names behind her back and sometimes to her face. Mute girl. Ghost girl. Some of them made a game of trying to get a reaction out of her, saying cruel things just to see if she would finally crack and respond. She never did. She just absorbed it all in that terrible stillness, her eyes fixed somewhere far away, like she had learned how to leave her own body when things got bad. And I am ashamed to say that in those early weeks, I did not defend her. I laughed along sometimes. I told myself it was not my problem. If I am being honest, Mara annoyed me at first. There was something about her silence that felt like a wall, like she was judging all of us, like she thought she was too good to even speak. I remember getting paired with her for a group project and feeling completely furious about it, because how was I supposed to work with someone who would not say one word to me? I tried talking to her and got nothing back, not even a glance, and I decided she was just difficult and stuck up. I complained to my friends about it. I asked the teacher to switch me to another group. I wanted nothing to do with the strange silent girl. But the teacher would not switch me, so I was stuck with Mara whether I liked it or not. The first day we were supposed to work together, I sat down next to her with my arms crossed, ready to do the entire project myself and resent every second of it. I asked her a question about the assignment, not even trying to be kind, just going through the motions. And Mara did something I did not expect. She did not speak. But she reached into her bag, pulled out a small notebook, wrote something down, and slid it across the desk to me. On the page, in careful, neat handwriting, she had written the answer to my question. And I just stared at it. That notebook changed everything, though I did not understand it yet. I realized in that moment that Mara was not refusing to communicate. She was communicating the only way she could. She could write. She could think. She had ideas, and opinions, and a whole mind working away behind those guarded eyes. She simply could not make the words come out of her mouth. I wrote a question back to her on the same page, feeling a little foolish, and slid the notebook back. And she wrote an answer. And just like that, we had a conversation, a real one, passed back and forth in ink across a desk, without either of us making a single sound. It was the strangest and gentlest thing. We finished that project entirely through the notebook, and by the end of it, something in me had shifted. I no longer saw Mara as stuck up or difficult. I saw a girl who was clearly, deeply frightened of something, though I did not yet know what. When we wrote back and forth, she was funny. She was clever. She noticed things about people that I never would have caught. On the last page of our project notes, almost hidden in the corner, she had written a tiny thank you to me, for being patient. And I felt a wave of shame, because I had not been patient at all, not really. But I decided, right then, that I wanted to be. So I started sitting near her. Not saying much, not making a big deal of it, just being there. I would leave the notebook open on the desk between us and write small things. A joke about the teacher. A question about the homework. A comment about the weather. And most of the time, Mara would write something back. It became our private language, this quiet passing of pages, in the middle of a school that had written her off completely. I learned quickly that I could never push her. The one time I asked her out loud why she did not talk, she went rigid and shut the notebook and would not open it again for 2 whole days. So I stopped asking. I learned to read her in other ways too. I learned that when she was anxious, she pressed her thumbnail hard into the side of her finger. I learned that loud noises made her flinch and go somewhere far away inside herself. I learned that she hated when people stood too close behind her, that she always needed to sit where she could see the door. I did not understand yet why any of this was true, but I started arranging things around her without a word. I would take the seat that put me between her and the crowded part of the room. I would warn her with a small tap before the bell rang. And slowly, she began to trust me. The other kids noticed that I had started spending time with the mute girl, and some of them gave me a hard time about it. They asked me why I bothered, what was wrong with me, whether I had a crush on the freak. For a few days I felt that old cowardice pulling at me, that fear of being mocked myself just for being near her. But then I thought about that little notebook, about the funny, clever, frightened person on the other side of those pages, and I felt disgusted with myself. So the next time someone called her a name in front of me, I told them to shut their mouth. And they were so surprised they did. Standing up for Mara that day felt like crossing a line I could not uncross, and I was glad. From then on, I did not hide our friendship, and I did not let people talk about her when I was around. A couple of my old friends drifted away, deciding I had gotten weird. But something better was happening. Mara had started to look for me in the mornings. When I walked into the classroom, her eyes would find me, and the smallest bit of tension would leave her shoulders, like my being there made the day survivable. Nobody had ever looked at me like I was safety before. And I realized I would do almost anything to keep being that for her. We found new ways to be friends outside of the notebook. She would show me drawings she made, incredible, detailed little worlds sketched in the margins of her books, forests and houses and skies full of birds. She would nudge a book toward me with a passage underlined, sharing something she loved without needing to say it. We would sit together at lunch in a corner, not talking, just being two people quietly keeping each other company, and it was one of the most peaceful things I have ever known. I stopped even thinking of her silence as strange. It was just Mara. And the more time I spent inside that silence with her, the more I understood how much was living in there. One afternoon I walked her partway home. She lived with her grandmother, she wrote, in a small house near the edge of town. As we walked, a car backfired somewhere down the street, a sharp loud crack of a sound, and Mara dropped straight to the ground with her hands over her head, shaking, her eyes squeezed shut. It lasted only a few seconds, but it terrified me. I knelt beside her, not touching her, just talking low and steady until she came back to herself. When she finally stood, she would not look at me. She wrote one word in her notebook before she hurried away. Sorry. And I walked home with my heart aching, knowing something very dark had happened to her. After that day, I stopped seeing Mara as a girl who chose not to speak, and started seeing her as a girl who could not. There is a difference, and it matters more than I ever knew. Something had happened to her, something so heavy that her own voice had gone into hiding to protect her. I went home and read everything I could find about people who go silent like that, and I learned there is a name for it, a real condition that comes from fear and trauma, where a person physically cannot make words come when the fear takes hold. And I understood, finally, that Mara was not being difficult. She was surviving. She had been surviving the whole time. Knowing that changed how I was with her completely. I stopped hoping she would talk, and started making sure she never felt she had to. I made our friendship a place with no pressure in it at all, a place where she was allowed to be exactly as she was, silent and safe and accepted. I think that was the first time in a long time that anyone had offered her that. She started to relax around me in a way I had not seen before. She smiled more, real smiles that reached her eyes. She wrote longer things in the notebook, whole paragraphs, thoughts she had clearly never told another living soul. She was letting me in, one careful inch at a time. Then came the day she told me why. We were sitting in the empty classroom after school, the notebook open between us, when Mara started writing, and did not stop. She wrote for a long time, pages of it, her hand shaking a little, and she would not let me see until she was done. And when she finally turned the notebook toward me, what I read made me go cold all over. She had lived, for the first years of her life, with her mother and her mother's boyfriend, and that house had been a place of terrible violence. She had learned very young that speaking, being noticed, drawing any attention at all, was the thing that brought the danger down on her. She wrote that the safest she ever felt as a small child was when she was completely silent, completely still, small enough to be forgotten in the corner of a room where awful things were happening. She had trained herself, to survive, to make no sound. And when the authorities finally took her away and brought her to her grandmother, the silence did not leave. It had grown into her, become part of how she was built. She wanted to speak. She wrote that she wanted it more than anything, that she was so tired of being trapped behind the quiet. But every time she tried, her throat closed and the old fear rose up and swallowed the words before they could get out. I read those pages twice, and by the end my eyes were burning. I thought about every person who had called her a freak, every kid who had laughed, every teacher who had sided her, every day I myself had judged her before I knew a single thing about her. Here was a girl whose silence was not coldness at all. It was a wound. It was a scar left by something no child should ever survive. And the world had looked at that scar and decided she was strange. I wrote back the only true thing I had. I wrote that I was so sorry for what had happened to her, and that she was the bravest person I had ever met. Mara read that, and for a moment her face just crumpled, and she cried, silently of course, the tears running down without a sound, the way she did everything. And I did something I had never done before. I asked her, in writing, if it was okay for me to sit beside her. She nodded. And I moved close, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat there as the light went gold across the floor, two kids holding a secret too big for either of us. I did not need her to say anything. I understood, in that quiet, that I had been let into the most guarded room in another person's heart. And I swore I would never betray it. From that day on, I was not just her friend. I was her guardian, in a way, the one person who knew the whole truth and carried it gently. I started helping her in small ways that no one else noticed. When a teacher was about to call on her to read, I would speak up first and offer to read instead, so she would not have to face that frozen terror. I would answer for her when someone put her on the spot, so most people never realized anything had happened. I was not speaking for her because I thought she could not. I was buying her time, and safety, until the day her own voice might come back. And her voice was trying to come back. I could see it. There were moments, more and more of them, when she would open her mouth as if to say something, and her lips would move, and the smallest breath of a sound would almost form before the fear closed over it again. She started making tiny noises sometimes, a soft laugh with just a whisper of voice in it, the very edges of speech. Each time it happened, I acted like it was nothing, because I understood that if I made a big deal of it, the pressure would send her right back into silence. But inside, my heart would leap. She was coming back to life. I want you to understand how long and slow this was, because it matters. This was not a movie where the silent girl suddenly speaks and everyone claps. This was months of patience. Months of the notebook. Months of sitting near her and asking nothing and offering everything. Months of small failures where the fear won, and she went quiet for days, and I just waited, and stayed. There were times I wondered if she would ever speak at all, and times I told myself it did not matter, that she was enough exactly as she was. And I meant it. I was not waiting for her to talk to prove anything. I was just there. That was the whole gift. I was just there. Then came the afternoon I will remember for the rest of my life. We were sitting on a bench in the school courtyard after everyone else had gone home, the two of us and the notebook and the late sun coming through the trees. Mara had been quiet even for her, something clearly weighing on her. I did not press. I just sat with her in the warm light and waited, the way I had learned to wait. And then she closed the notebook. She set the pen down. And she turned to look at me, really look at me, with an expression I had never seen before, something between terror and hope, like a person standing at the edge of a very high cliff. She opened her mouth. And her lips began to move. And I did not breathe, did not move a muscle, did not do a single thing that might frighten her voice back into hiding. Her throat worked. A tiny sound came, and then broke off. She closed her eyes, and I watched her gather every ounce of courage she had spent her whole life being denied. And then, so quietly that I almost missed it, barely more than a breath in the shape of a word, Mara said my name. She said my name. The first word she had spoken out loud and longer than anyone knew, and she had chosen to give it to me. I felt the whole world go still around us. I did not cheer. I did not gasp or make it into a spectacle. I understood, even in that overwhelming moment, that the most important thing I could do was to stay calm, to make her feel that speaking was safe, that nothing bad would come rushing in because she had made a sound. So I just smiled at her, and I said her name back, gently, the way you would answer someone you loved. And Mara's face broke open into the most beautiful, disbelieving, tearful smile I have ever seen. She had done it. After all those years locked behind the silence, she had reached through it, and her first word out was the name of the person who had waited. We sat there on that bench until the sun went down, and she said a few more words to me, halting and quiet and precious, each one costing her so much and meaning even more. She told me she had been practicing at home, alone in her room, trying to teach her voice how to work again. She told me that with me was the only place she had ever felt safe enough to try. And I told her, out loud, that I would be that safe place for as long as she needed, and that whether she said one word or 1,000 or none at all, she was my friend and that would never change. It did not all happen at once after that. Speaking stayed hard for Mara. There were still days the fear won and the words would not come, and on those days we went back to the notebook without complaint from either of us. But something fundamental had changed. She knew now that her voice was still in there, that it could reach the surface, that at least one person would receive it gently. She started speaking to her grandmother a little, at home, where it was safest. Then to me in quiet places. Then, eventually, in the smallest of whispers, a single word to a teacher who had the sense not to make a fuss. Inch by inch, she was coming home to herself. I wish I could tell you the whole school suddenly saw how wrong they had been, but people are not always that quick to change. Some of them still whispered. But something in Mara had grown stronger, and their whispers did not reach her the way they used to. She had one true friend who knew exactly who she was, and one real thing was worth more than 100 cruel voices. She walked a little taller. She met people's eyes now. And on the rare, brave days when she spoke a few words out loud in class, some of those same kids who had mocked her went completely quiet, because they finally understood there had been a whole person there all along. Looking back, I am not proud of who I was in the beginning of this story. I was a coward, and I was cruel in the small lazy way that cruelty usually comes, not with fists but with laughter and looking away. I judged a frightened, wounded girl and decided she was cold, when the truth was she was the strongest person in that building, surviving something most of us could not imagine, and doing it in silence so as not to be a burden. If that notebook had never slid across the desk, if I had switched groups, I would have gone my whole life thinking she was just the strange girl who never talked. And I would have been so wrong. What Mara gave me, in the end, was so much bigger than what I gave her. She taught me to look at quiet people and wonder instead of judge. She taught me that silence is not emptiness, that a person who says nothing may be holding an entire universe of thought and feeling and pain that they simply cannot let out. She taught me that you can reach someone without a single word, that patience is its own language, that presence is a kind of love. Every gift I thought I was giving her, she gave right back to me, teaching me to be a gentler person than the boy who once rolled his eyes at the mute girl in the back of the room. Mara and I stayed friends all through school. Her speaking got easier over the years, though it was never fully easy, and she never became a loud or chatty person, and I would not have wanted her to. She stayed quiet, thoughtful, watchful, an old soul who chose her few words with care and meant every one of them. But she had her voice. She had built it back from nothing, from the ruins of the worst kind of childhood, one trembling word at a time. And I got to stand beside her the whole way and watch it happen. It remains, to this day, the greatest privilege of my life, that a girl who trusted no one decided, for some reason, to trust me. The last time I saw her before we went our separate ways, she hugged me, and she said out loud, clear and steady and without any fear in it at all, that I had saved her life. And I told her the truth, which was that she had it backwards. She had saved mine. She had taken a selfish, frightened boy who cared too much what other people thought, and shown him what really matters, and made him brave enough to stand beside someone the whole world had turned away from. We were two broken kids who fixed each other in a language made of ink and patience and quiet company. And I will carry her with me for the rest of my days. So here is what I have learned, and I want you to really take it with you. Patience and presence can reach a place that words never can. When you meet someone who is silent, or strange, or cold, or difficult, do not be so quick to decide who they are. You are only seeing the surface of a story you know nothing about. That quiet person in the back of the room might be carrying a weight that would crush you, holding it all in the only way they know how, which is to make no sound at all. The kindest thing you can ever do is to sit beside them, ask nothing, offer everything, and simply stay. Sometimes staying is the whole rescue. Everyone you meet is fighting a silent battle. The loud ones and the quiet ones, the popular ones and the invisible ones, every single person is carrying something you cannot see. The girl who never spoke a word taught me that the pain that makes no noise is often the deepest pain of all, and that the smallest, most patient kindness can reach further into a wounded heart than 1,000 grand gestures. You do not have to fix anyone. You do not have to have the perfect words. You just have to be present, and gentle, and willing to wait. That is how you reach the places words cannot go. That is how you help someone find their way back to their own voice. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. It truly means the world to me that you stayed with Mara and me through all of it. If her story touched your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe to AU Family Channel, where a brand new story is waiting for you every single week. And please remember this. Patience and presence can reach a place that words never can, and everyone you meet is fighting a silent battle you know nothing about. So be gentle with the quiet ones. Sit beside them, ask nothing, and simply stay. You never know whose voice you might help bring home. I will see you in the next one.